Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. My name is Lasya. I'm from Marquette High School.
I'm Cheryl, and I'm also from Marquette.
I'm Shaily, and I'm also a senior at Marquette High School, and we are the executive board of our school's chapter of NAMI, or National Alliance Against Mental Illness.
Okay. So I guess I'll get started. Can you tell us a little bit about your education, like where you did your undergrad, where you went to med school and all of that?
So I went to University of Pennsylvania for my undergrad, and then when I was there, I was an anthropology major, and I also got a master's in science and anthropology at the same time as my undergrad from there. And then I went to medical school at Yale. And then after that, I did my psychiatry training at Stanford. And then now I'm an assistant professor at Washington University in St. Louis.
That's awesome. Thank you.
So, what are you specialized in, and what kind of patients do you typically see?
Good question. So I didn't do extra training to specialize, so you can. So in psychiatry, you can do fellowships afterwards, and you can do child and adolescent or forensics and things like that. I didn't do that, but I do in my clinical practice see mostly college and graduate students, and that's by preference. So people who are 18 to 30 about, but that's just by choice. I do outpatient psychiatry, so I don't work in the inpatient hospital. I do that when I have to, but I don't do it all the time. And I also see faculty, staff, and healthcare workers. So that part of my practice has increased over COVID, but I see people who work for the hospital in some capacity.
And then we were also wondering, what are your current research interests and the areas that you do research in?
I guess it's broad. So I would say I don't do a ton of research in the typical sense of the word. I do a lot of writing, a lot of thinking in the sort of broader sense. I am doing some work around physician wellness during COVID. So I'm helping a med student with a project on medical student mental health around COVID. And it's not just, I guess, mental health, it's more broad than that, but specifically focused on med students.
That's awesome. Thank you. So, moving right along, the COVID-19 pandemic has caused a lot of isolation at home. What psychological effects does this have on a lot of people staying at home?
What I would say is we know that social isolation leads to loneliness. And we know that loneliness is a risk factor for mental illness of all kinds, and especially depression. I think especially in certain populations. So, people who are older are already at risk of COVID, but they're also at high risk of loneliness. And then actually surprisingly young adults are the quote unquote loneliest generation, even though you might think that you guys are pretty connected because you use social media and you feel like you're really connected. If you look at the data, the 18 to sort of, again, the population you typically see actually has higher rates of loneliness and feeling sort of disconnected to people. So, being in a place where then you also are removed from your social supports because they took all of the ways that you could normally communicate and socialize away would make it so you might feel more sad. We're really used to, we're like humans, are social creatures, and we're animals, really, and animals are social creatures too. And so without that sort of support and pack kind of mentality, we do isolate and it feels lonely. Even people who are introverts really do get some satisfaction from seeing people, and in ways they might not even realize, going to the mailbox and seeing someone, or walking down the hallway and seeing someone. So there are little ways where you still feel like I'm not alone in the world, and there's people who see me and recognize me. And when you're at home and in front of the computer all day, or a lot of that has changed, I think there is a lot of risk there. I think it's just trying to figure out how you make sure that the risk doesn't become something super serious, and identify that if you're not eating, or you're not sleeping, or you're not doing the things that you used to do, and you're not feeling happy or interested, that's more of a warning sign, and you say, I need to get help, or I need to talk to someone about this because this doesn't feel like me.
So, there have been a lot of things going on, and the media has been kind of stressing some people out. So, how would you recommend like having people stay informed yet manage that stress?
All of the media is super stressful. The news is stressful. I mean, if you could watch the news and not feel stressed out, I would be very impressed with you. So, making sure you have some sources that you really trust that you can go to so you don't have to go to a million places is one way that that's helpful. Another is sort of like limiting how often you use it. So that's hard to do in a time where it sort of feels like if you're disconnected, everything is going to implode because, like, that's where your friends are and that's where the news is and everything's changing and it changes really quickly right now. But the news will still be there if you sleep. And the news will still be there, if you take a little break from it. So I think it's important to sort of say, like, if you're feeling super agitated or you're feeling really anxious reading it, to sort of notice that and put away the phone, stop watching the news, put on something stupid on TV instead, talk to a friend on the phone or like a video chat or something. Try to find another way to divert your energy that feels better. I think there's no like definitive, like, this is the amount of time that watching the news is bad, but the longer you watch, like, you're not exercising, you're not outside where you could like wear a mask and still enjoy the day. There's definitely ways to still be outside. I think there's no set amount of time for sure, but you can limit time. I would say don't use it before bed. I had to do that myself because I was noticing, like, before bed, I would like be scrolling on my phone and then wouldn't sleep as well, or would go to like bed 3 hours later than I intended because I was like, trying to chase some news story or make sure I was up with something and getting really like agitated and angry about it. And then I've gotten to the point where I like put my phone somewhere else and like read or listen to a podcast for at least the hour before bed. I'm not good enough to say that I can do that for hours before bed, but we're saying like the hour and just do that and sort of like calm down before bed, give yourself a good night's sleep. That's really important. So I've been doing that and I think it really helps.
So just kind of going along with COVID, obviously you talked about how one of your interests is like physician health. So due to like the increased cases of COVID-19, obviously a lot of doctors and healthcare workers are feeling that strain. So how can they take care of their mental health during this time? Like, what are your recommendations?
Doctors are really bad. Doctors, nurses, anybody who works in healthcare, like, I think of the hospital as like a little village. So there's pretty much everybody. There's so many people who work in the hospital, right? There's cafeteria workers. There's people when you walk in that when say hi when you like get there that point you to the right place. There's so many people that work in the hospital. So we often think about doctors because that makes like we're vocal and out there and we like are on the TV shows and stuff, but there's so many people who count as essential workers. So I'm just putting that out there. But I think, we have to be able to say, like, to take care of others, you have to take care of yourself. And we're not good at that, but it's really important. We're not actually good at taking care of others when we haven't taken care of ourselves. There's like only so much adrenaline can do. So, like, sure, for maybe the first couple weeks, like, we could kind of power through with not a lot of sleep and not a lot of food and just sort of go, our job is to take care of people. I'm going to take care of people and not go, oh, what's wrong with me? I'm sad, But I think the longer this goes on and the more we're like responsible for taking care of people, we have to be able to say, like, step back, notice how we're feeling, notice that we need things ourselves and that we're allowed to have needs that are like not selfish, but like are important. So feed yourself, sleep, try to notice feelings when you have them and give yourself space for that.
That's awesome. So I know that you work with college students a lot. Coming from like a competitive school, you've probably experienced it. But what effects does a competitive school, competitive environment have on a student, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you are already experiencing that in high school. I was like that in high school. I think, it definitely places a lot of pressure on you to do well and do focus on school, and that's the only thing you're focusing on, and everything else is extraneous, or school activities, the things you have to do the next step, makes it really hard to like enjoy the steps along the way. I think people don't necessarily always stop to like enjoy the steps and smile and notice things. I think when you're like so future oriented, you often miss like the kind of ways that like, that people are there for you, that school is fun, that things are fun, that you don't need to like always be going after goals. But I think then you often will like, if you get a bad grade or like something impedes this, goal, it is like everything has thrown off your whole entire path as opposed to like just being a sort of speed bump. It feels like a catastrophe. And I think that that's something that happens a lot for people in that like kind of mindset, which is like, this is my purpose, this is my goal. If I can't get there, that's a problem. And every little tiny thing that's not perfect is a huge thing. So you got to be able to give yourself some leeway. There's a lot of anxiety, a lot of pressure, a lot of worry. I think people definitely get a lot of physical symptoms that they don't necessarily realize is related to mental health. So like stomach aches, heart rate going kind of fast, like trouble breathing, and not noticing that that has anything to do with what's going on up here. But it often has a lot to go do with what's going on up there, and not in a there's something wrong with me way, but in a totally normal way. Like your brain and body are totally connected, and it's a disservice to say that they're not, right? Like when we separate them, we mess up. Like that was a mistake from being able to say insurance companies charge healthcare differently for mental health and physical health. They're completely connected. And so if you say I have a stomach ache and you think it's like wimpy, that it has to do with the fact that you have a test tomorrow, that's not helpful. Like you have a test tomorrow. It's okay. You're allowed to be anxious. You have a test tomorrow. That test really matters. Give yourself a break.
So, how should students like try and manage that stress either themselves or like help others manage that stress?
Yeah, I mean, again, it kind of comes down to like what works for you. So trying to figure out like first give yourself a break. I'm really big on that. So naming feelings, naming emotions often helps. Like giving yourself space for it really helps. It feels like silly and you would be surprised, but being like, I feel sad actually is really helpful instead of being like, I just need to do all of this work and I need to keep going. But being like, wow, I'm really anxious right now is actually like a way to sort of go, oh, and recognize like in the moment that you're actually feeling a lot of things as opposed to just kind of going and not stopping and trying to distract yourself with work. So naming feelings helps, figuring out what coping skills helps, the same way I was talking about for healthcare professionals would work for you, figuring out what kind of coping skills are helpful, factoring in time for breaks in studying. So college kids hate me for this, but like you cannot study all of the time. So you can take breaks. Like you have to factor in breaks and sleep actually, because you actually won't do better. Like if you don't sleep, like you need to sleep to keep doing well, or you need to take a break and go see a friend and go to the movies because you actually will do better on your like studying and tests because you took a break. You that extra hour that you put into doing work won't actually amount to much, right? But you think it will because you've like convinced yourself that like it's impossible to take a break because then you're like someone's going to beat you on the test or like somebody's going to do better, right? That's like wrong because you have to take a break. So, factoring in breaks, you can time them if you need to, but factoring in breaks, factoring in socializing, giving yourself like it's okay, understanding that people do fail, I think is like a big thing. Talking about failure out loud and not it not being like taboo to fail. So like within your friend groups, within like your whatever people you feel close with, talking about like how you're feeling in like actual words and talking about the fact that you're not like killing it all the time. Like I think people think all of their friends are doing so awesome and they're the only ones struggling, or like, they're in classes and like they do like badly on a test and they see everyone else's paper because they like look over and the only other grades they saw were like A's and they got a C, and so they think everybody got an A. There's no way everybody got an A. Like you just saw the two people who like the grades just like confirmed your like suspicions, right? That doesn't help you. So like making sure that people are more open about things like that. If we like put on this like face and pretend that everything's perfect, then like just like contributes to a culture that's not helpful. Like failure is leadership, vulnerability is leadership. It actually makes people closer to each other to tell the truth and be open and honest. It makes for better friendships, makes for better relationships in general. So like doing that, asking your friends like how they're doing and actually meaning it, and not just like, how are you? Like, it's fine. How are you? But really like actually meaning like, I noticed that you're like not hanging out with us anymore. Like, what's going on? And not really in a way that's like accusatory or like, puts a label on it, but giving people space. I think we often are like, I think you're depressed. Like, that doesn't help, actually. It makes people really defensive because, like, if they associate being depressed with being weak, or they associate being depressed with something else, like, if you tell them that's what they are, they'll really defend against it and say, like, I'm not depressed. I don't know what you're talking about. Like, that doesn't make any sense. But if you say, like, I've noticed that you're not talking, or I noticed that you don't want to hang out with us anymore, and you just give them space to talk, you might be like, hey, like, that sounds like you're sad, at least. Like, maybe you want to talk to someone, and then you can kind of guide them from there without putting the words and ideas in their mouth from the beginning where they can, like, push back a lot. And then I'd say, like, there's no wrong time to get help.
I think that's about it. Thank you so much for getting on this call and answering all of our questions. It gives us all a lot of insight into how to act and what to do in times of crisis. So thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I'm happy to anytime. People can, like, reach out. I use social a lot. I'm on Twitter a lot. You can, like, at Dr. Jessie Gold me whenever you want. I spell Jessie with an I, like Jessi. It's a place that I hang out the most, so I'm sure you guys are probably, like, too young for Twitter, and you think that even if I use Twitter, I'm, like, lame, but, it is what it is.
No, for sure. Thank you so much for your time today. And yeah, I think we definitely learned a lot and got a lot of good reminders on how to take care of ourselves and those around us. So thank you.
Yeah, you got it. No problem. Happy to help.